Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be going through a little bit of a dilemma. Should you always take a gun rammer inside World of Tanks? And the perfect vehicle, to give my example, is the Chinese Tier 8 Premium Medium, the 122TM. I have two builds on this vehicle, as you can see. I have a turbo, vents, and a gun rammer, which is an all-in aggressive build, where I want to have the speed and the damage per minute to overpower my opponents. And then I have another build, which is vents, coated optics, and vert stabs. And I've elected to take that one in this battle. And today I'm going to be letting you know exactly why, as well as also thinking through, not just for an example of the 122TM, but how I try and set up a lot of my vehicles. Now, immediately a lot of you will be like, oh my lord, he's taking vents instead of a gun rammer. And I totally respect that. If you're someone who wants to have 7% rate of fire improvement compared to the vents, and sacrifice 3% of everything else about your vehicle that cruise skill will improve, that's absolutely fine. But bear with me, and I'll try and give you some ideas as to why on the 122TM I feel like it's a sacrifice that's worth making. So firstly, damage per minute in World of Tanks. Your rate of fire is something that your gun rammer will improve. However, some vehicles, like the 122TM, are absolutely horrendous with regards to their rate of fire or with regards to their damage per minute. So there's two ways of looking at this in World of Tanks with equipment and cruise skills. You can either try and improve the aspects of your vehicle that are the worst, or you can try and improve the aspects of your vehicle which are the best. Think about, for example, on a TOG or a Mouse or a T95. They're all really slow tanks, and so you should use a turbo on them. And that's because a turbo will give you a flat increase to a parameter on a vehicle. So for a Mouse, you're going to go from 20 to 24 kilometers an hour. That's a huge increase. And the difference between a Mouse that uses a turbo and a Mouse that doesn't use a turbo is just astronomical. However, damage per minute in a gun rammer is not a flat increase. It's not, for example, saying you fire one more round a minute extra. On something like a Jagdpanzer E100, that would be insane. But it's a flat increase. Outside of a firepower slot, it's going to be 10%. And on a vehicle like this, which has an atrocious base rate of fire of about 3.75 rounds a minute, a gun rammer will only boost that up to just over 4. Now, that's still a big difference. You're changing the reload time of the tank from just under 16 seconds with vents down to 14.77 seconds. So you're shaving off 1.2 seconds off the reload. It's very significant. But what you need to also consider is that that equipment slot is taking up something else that you could be using on the vehicle. And in a vehicle like the 122TM, which doesn't have enough view range, thus it has to have coated optics, and it's more about delivering the blows consistently, therefore I definitely prefer to use vertical stabilizers, and we don't need to really improve the accuracy of the vehicle, so we don't need an aiming device, then for me the gun rammer seems to become the obvious one to drop. Now, I'll show you after this game exactly why vents are improving so many different aspects of the vehicle that you might not consider. But for now, I also want to talk about other vehicles and where like a gun rammer is just a complete no-brainer and you have to take it. For example, vehicles that fire very quickly, vehicles that have very good rates of fire. They need to fire multiple shells for every time the enemy fires, or they just want to overpower their opponents with great rates of fire. I'm talking about tanks like the Tortoise, or even Tier 8 Premium Medium tanks like the Kampfpanzer. Vehicles like that have to fire often, and so therefore you try and do everything you can to try and improve their fire. However, something that I realized about a year ago when I was playing the Manticore, which I thought was going to be absolutely horrendous because of its terrible damage per minute, is that I realized that rate of fire sometimes isn't what's important, but delivering the rounds consistently and with a relatively high alpha damage is. And that's where the 122TM shines. Its 400 alpha damage is so much better than most other Tier 8 mediums. Most Tier 8 mediums have about 320, or at least back in the day, about 240 alpha damage. But for this thing having 400, it's more about connecting the shots consistently with something like a gun rammer and improving your accuracy by 3% with the vents than it is about trying to fire just a little bit quicker when you're not really firing fast anyway. And the reason why I bring up the Manticore with this is because I realized that tanks like this they're not often like in all-in engagements. What they're often doing is working corners like this, working bushes, they're sniping. And so for tanks like this, you have to stay hidden for 10 seconds after you fire. A vehicle like this isn't really going to be just crunching through a flank and going all in. It's kind of like a support sniper, or it trades one and then it falls back and it hides. And that's because the spotting mechanics in World of Tanks mean that you stay lit up for 10 seconds after you fire, after you've been spotted. And so with a vehicle like this, you kind of have to go and hide for 10 seconds or more. If you're playing at high tier and you think they've got designated target, then you have to hide for 12 seconds. And if you think it's a light tank that is using designated target and the directive, very unusual situation, you're going to be lit up for 14 seconds. And so with a vehicle like this, I almost feel like I play so much more consistently by actually having that high alpha and longer reload. Because you kind of have enough time to go hide, wait for your vision to reset, and then you come out and you deliver another shell, hopefully accurately against your opponents. And so that's something that's really important to figure out. And it took me years before it kind of dawned on me how that when you have a tank, that its rate of fire synergizes with the natural spotting reset time of 10 seconds to 14 seconds, depending on what you're getting engaged by in World of Tanks, that it just works. It's one of the reasons why the Manticore can be such a frustrating tank. You'd look at the Manticore and you'd think, oh, its DPM is absolutely horrendous. Surely a T100 LT will be pumping out more damage. But you go play a T100 LT, and what are you doing unless you're in those all-in engagements? More times out of 10, you fire one as an ambush shot, and then you have to fall back or try and avoid fire after you've been detected. And therefore, you're not likely to be able to get your shots in accurately. And so the Manticore, with its 390 and then its 15-second reload time, seems to actually be more effective in most engagements, apart from those all-in ones, than vehicles with high DPM and high rates of fire like a T100 LT. And so, why not take the aspects of your tank that are the best and try and improve them, rather than try and dump scaling factors like a 7% DPM increase into your rate of fire on a vehicle like this? Now let me clarify why I'm saying 7% and not 10%. A lot of you might be thinking, oh, QB thinks that a gun rammer only does 7%. And that's because not a lot of people realize that vents on a vehicle inside a slot, like the mobility slot here, which will improve our crew skill by 6%, it increases all of the aspects of your vehicle by crew skill divided by 2 as the absolute, as the relative value. So for every crew skill, every 2% of crew skill that you increase, pretty much everything about your vehicle gets 1% better. So if you're using a premium consumable like pay-to-win QuickyBaby is here, that 10% increase to my crew skill is actually going to end up improving all of the aspects of my tank by 5%. That's 5% view range, 5% aim time, 5% rate of fire, 5% accuracy, and even it's improving your other crew skills, just like vents will. That's what I want to show you in the post-game stats, is that when you start to get a wide variety of skills on your tank, like recon, situational awareness, off-road driving, and you've got clutch braking, intuition, the list goes on, that your crew skill from things like a premium consumable, brothers in arms, and for your equipment slot, vents, will also amplify these aspects on your tank. So it's weird to think that your camo rating on a vehicle gets better because when you have concealment on your crew, that because their overall base percentage of crew skill is better, that they're actually going to be better even at 100% camo than a vehicle that had less camo rating. So in this situation, I don't want to leave the cap circle right now until I know it's safe, and seeing that there's a Patriot fighting a 283, we know that the Patriot was roughly on 3/4 health and so was the 283, I'm just going to push on, be a little bit greedy here and try and get some more damage in, that we have been delivering very consistently in this game. The 122 TM is an absolute dark horse of World of Tanks. Nobody talks about it, nobody says it's overpowered, probably because it has pretty much like tier 3 level damage per minute. It's got like 1,300 DPM, so it's not ripping you apart quickly. But one thing that this vehicle is doing is just sitting in a position, having great armor, great accuracy, great consistency, fantastic ammunition. We're talking about 233 APCR rounds with great shell velocity, 299 millimeters of heat pen as well, and even some great HE rounds to boot, 62 millimeters pen and 515. This vehicle is actually one of my top picks for all of you out there who need something that's just a little bit slower and a little bit more consistent. And with that, you are going to do some wild things with the 122 TM. I think it's one of the most overpowered tier 8 medium tanks, and yet nobody is talking about it in World of Tanks. So much so that while it's early days yet, and I've only played 57 games in this tank because it's not the most exciting vehicle, and I usually only play my premium tanks to be able to make credits, I've been packing 79% wins in my 57 games, and some pretty consistent other statistics to boot. And all of this without a gun rammer. Now, firstly, I want to clarify a couple of situations where you absolutely, utterly must have a gun rammer. Once again, tanks with great rates of fire because you're going to have to fire often. Also, if you're in a competitive situation, i.e. you're playing Clan Wars or you're playing Onslaught, you must have a rate of fire. And that is because vehicles often get in a fight against tanks that are the same as them, and it's about who will reload first to be able to deliver that second shot. And if you're without a gun rammer, quite often you'll be leaving your opponent with a half to 1 second window to be able to deliver that shot to you. So if you do find yourself playing against the same tanks again and again and again, and you put yourself at a rate of fire disadvantage, then that could really not be favorable. But for the random queue, when you're playing against a wide variety of vehicles and the engagements are more holistic rather than who reloads first, then you might find that increasing the consistency of your tank might be the key to victory for you. So here we're going to see the difference between two 122 TMs, one that's using vents and then one that is using a gun rammer instead in conjunction with the vert stabs and the coated optics, exactly the build that you saw me use in this gameplay. And each of these vehicles will have Brothers in Arms, concealment, repairs, recon, off-road driving, and it will also have situational awareness. Pretty much all of the basic crew skills, but we could add other things into the mix that the vents would improve. And so accordingly, we see that while there is a significant rate of fire increase from the gun rammer, the build that uses vents has 0.06 seconds aim time improvement. It has 0.1 accuracy improvement. It also goes 1 kilometer an hour faster, over 1 kilometer an hour faster on all of the surfaces. And vehicles like this, they're like the 122 TM that are limited by their ground resistances, the vents will improve your driver's skills as well as also off-road driving if you have it on the vehicles to improve those ground resistances to make the vehicle faster on all terrains. In addition to this, if you have things like repairs on a vehicle like this, that I thoroughly would recommend that you do, the vents will also improve your crew's overall repair skill, shaving off 0.13 seconds off your track repair time, as well as also adding nearly 1% camo rating when you're stationary to your overall vehicle and 0.5% of camo to your tank when you're moving. As well as also, and here is possibly one of the biggest tickets, increasing your view range by a hefty 12.5 meters, going from a sub 445 meters view range, which is below the maximum spotting distance inside World of Tanks, to 451, which is above the maximum spotting distance. And all of these micro improvements do add up. And while, when I'm not in an all-in engagement, like the 122 TM hopefully isn't, I can play around a slightly worse reload, especially when I'm evading being spotted for those 10, 12, or 14 seconds from my opponents. Quite often, the micro improvements in all of the other areas you just don't notice through the battle, but they add up to making a holistic tank that can be able to get through a wide variety of situations. And the result here in the worst possible matchmaking for the 122 TM is that we did 50% more damage than any of even the tier 10s on our tank could achieve, get 1,600 base experience and make a very meaty profit indeed. So the gun rammer, and the gun rammer versus vents, or the gun rammer versus turbo, or the gun rammer versus durability device, depending on what kind of a vehicle that you are playing. It's a module that I'm going to take on 70, 80, even 90% of the vehicles in World of Tanks. But there are some certain situations and certain tanks in the game where I think you should ask yourself twice about what will be more effective for you and your play style. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below, what is your go-to piece of equipment on your favorite tank? And please don't tell me it's a camo net on an Object 140. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.